Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Spin It Social Hour. My name is Stefan Kaplan, and it is an absolute pleasure to be here with everyone today. This is the 22nd show of the Spin It Social Hour, and the Spin It Social Hour is a labor of love born out of care and concern for our photo community. When this pandemic hit, I decided as a social media and visual strategist that I was going to reach out and try to help the photo community to get their names out there more, to get their work out there more, so that as this pandemic continues and hopefully subsides one day, that they are able to get more work and also be better known, because there is so much going on out there in the world right now that a lot of things are getting lost in the mix, and we don't want that to happen with our photographers. So once again, my name is Stefan Kaplan. Welcome. I have worked with the likes of the Pulitzer Prizes, AARP, the Jackson Charitable Foundation, and I also work with my dear colleague Sri Srinivasan and his DigiMentors group, doing tons of live stream productions and many other social media needs that we meet. So today, our guest is Tom Franklin, and we're going to bring him on very soon. But as a show, we must try to get sponsors these days and everything else. So I am really thrilled to announce my first sponsor, which is Real Talk Live from the Barn with my friend Emilio Pardo, who is now, I am producing the show with him. And it is how to deal with the onslaught of stress next week. We will be talking with Janet Taylor, who's a psychiatrist who has been on Good Morning America and many other shows. And it's a show that will deal with real talk about COVID-19, economic uncertainty, racial injustice, and many other topics. So on that note, Real Talk Live from the Barn. Join us next week at 11 a.m. on Sunday, September 6th. But today we are here to talk about photography and social media with Tom Franklin. So let me give him the build-up that he deserves as the great photographer that he is. Thomas E. Franklin is an award-winning photographer, multimedia journalist, documentary filmmaker, and educator. He is perhaps best known for his iconic flag-raising photograph taken at Ground Zero on 9/11, which was depicted on a U.S. postage stamp and has helped raise over $10 million for victims of the terrorist attacks, and for which he was a Pulitzer Prize finalist. He has also produced highly acclaimed multimedia projects on topics such as a recent heroin epidemic and toxic dumping by the Ford Motor Company on Native American land in North Jersey. He joined Montclair State University in 2015 as a professor in multimedia journalism. After nearly 30 years in the news industry, he is currently working on a series of ongoing projects related to immigration and migration. We are currently living in one of the largest mass migrations of refugees in world history. Prior to COVID-19, the story was getting headlines, and now you don't hear about it much anymore. And Tom Franklin is now here to talk about it with us and his whole body of work. Tom, welcome.
Hey, Stefan, thanks for having me.
Welcome to the Spin It Social Hour, and thank you for being here. It's an honor to have you on. I can't believe that we've lived in Ramsey together since I've been up here probably, and we met like 6 months ago through Carla Baranakis, a colleague of yours and an ex-colleague of mine, and at the New York Times. And wow, it's just great to have you here, man.
Yeah, it's good to meet you. And I thank Carla for making that connection for us.
She's amazing. She's a great woman. And so, you know, it's great that you two get to work together at Montclair State. And this is going to be a great show. I've prepared a lot for you, and we're going to have 2 live viewers that are going to come on and ask a couple of questions. But first let's get into the story about Tom Franklin, and let me get right here. Sorry, it's so what I wanted to ask you, Tom, was how did you get started in photography, and what was the experience that changed the way you viewed photography? And tell us the story, Tom.
So I was a really creative kid growing up. I was very artistic. I was voted most artistic in high school, and I had this creative side to me. And then I took my mom always encouraged me to be creative. And when I was in college, I discovered photography, and I took a photojournalism class. And when I was in college at SUNY Purchase, I got a job working in the darkroom at the Journal News newspaper, which is a fairly large suburban paper. Mm-hmm. And I was printing pictures that went in the paper the next day, and I was hooked. I wanted to be like the photojournalists whose photographs I was developing, and there was something about photography that spoke to me, and I think it has a lot to do with the immediacy of photography. I did not really have the patience for drawing and sculpture and painting. Photography was immediate. Plus, I'm a curious person by nature, and I like interacting with people. So photojournalism provided this great opportunity for me to go out and make pictures, stay creative, make stuff, and also report. And also, it got me a front row seat to a lot of really important events. I was always interested in sports. I played sports, and to be able to cover sports as a photojournalist was a lot of fun earlier in my career. As you quickly learn, it's not as easy as it looks, and it's very demanding. And but I went through a phase where I covered lots of professional sports.
Yeah, you did. Yeah. We showed a few of those in the intro slideshow that I built for you, and that photo you took of Derek Jeter, man. I mean, wow.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks. I love covering sports. It's hard, and especially when you do it on a regular basis. And I have great respect for a lot of my colleagues who do that on a regular basis.
Right. No, it's sports photography. I've always said is the sports photographers are in a league of their own because it takes a whole different set of skills. It's a whole different set of skills from walking the streets and doing photojournalism and other things. But the one thing I love about you is that you've done so much, and now doing your thing of being a professor at Montclair State and giving back. And I've heard a lot about you. You're a very giving professor, a very giving person in nature. And isn't it the best to be able to now teach?
I love teaching. I had a long career in newspapers, and I worked for the Bergen Record for 20-something years, and I had 30 years of being on the street, and I really liked that. But I had even going back to like the mid 2000s, I started to see how the industry was changing, how storytelling was changing. Mm-hmm. I pretty much taught myself how to produce video and create multimedia. Mm-hmm. And the last 15 years of my career, I have, been a cross-platform, journalist. I do my own writing. I shoot and edit my own videos. I work as a one-man band. Mm-hmm. And but all throughout my years of working at the Record, I also taught. I taught at Ramapo College for 12 years as an adjunct.
Right.
And then when this opportunity at Montclair State presented itself in 2015, I jumped at it. And I love being at Montclair. I love the students that we have there. Yeah. I love being able to share what I've learned through my career with other people. I get great satisfaction out of seeing young people, get excited about storytelling, and I can't get enough of that when they're excited. And so I try to share that passion with them.
I know. I just recently started my first time teaching at FIT this past semester, and it was a thrill. And of course, wow, what an experience being thrown into teaching. And then right away, out of the blue, the pandemic hits, and then we're all virtual. So, wow, that was quite the experience. But Montclair is a great campus. I love walking around there. And a neighbor of ours here, Karen Barrett, is actually the captain of the Montclair State Police on campus there. So, nice. Yeah, nice. His son and our son goes to school together. Anyway, so that's the beginning of your story. So let me bring up because I have so much to show here with you. You have quite the body of work, Tom, I have to tell you, and it's amazing. Sorry, I had this slideshow. Rule number one, I have the slideshow at the very beginning here. So let me set here. And so many people know, and many don't, and we're going to enlighten them today about your iconic photo at Ground Zero on September 11th of the firefighters raising the flag. It's with September 11th coming up, it's always a tough time of the year for so many people. Our hearts go out to everybody who ever lost somebody there and everybody who's lived through this all. But tell us about, not briefly, but tell us about some of that day, Tom, and how it played out for you. That's the only way I can put it.
Sure. So on the morning of September 11th, I happened to be in the office at the Bergen Record for a meeting. I had just gotten back from the Dominican Republic a day or two before, working on a story related to baseball, and it was unusual that I was in the office that early. And an editor came running into the photo department saying that a plane had hit the World Trade Center. I was on the fourth floor of a building in Hackensack, and I ran out to the window and I could see the North Tower from there. Immediately knew instinctively that that was not an accident, that this was significant. Grabbed my gear, ran to my car, started to drive to Manhattan. When the second plane hit, I diverted down to Jersey City, Exchange Place, and I made pictures there most of the morning of a very chaotic, dramatic scene there of rescue boats bringing people to Jersey City, where they had a triage center set up with this just surrealistic scene of smoke billowing from the towers in the background. That photograph right there on the right was taken in Jersey City, and that's a fireman being rescued. And it was incredible. And it was difficult to make pictures there because the police were trying to get everybody away from there, and almost got arrested a couple of times. There was I was carrying 2 digital SLR cameras with me. I got pushed by a police officer. The camera banged into the pole and stopped working. And so it was a really, for the obvious reasons, but also for what had happened, with my camera, it was kind of a stressful scene.
Sure.
And then around 1 o'clock, I and another photographer, we talked our way onto a boat, and we got to Ground Zero early in the afternoon. And you had that picture of me wearing the mask near Ground Zero. That's an important photograph because that's the only picture made of me that day. And it was taken by his photographer, John Wheeler, the guy who we talked, he and I talked our way onto that boat.
Right.
And what's ironic, significant about this photograph is this was made shortly after we got there. And after this picture was taken, I moved all around the wreckage there making photographs. And about 3 hours later, it was in virtually that same exact spot that the flag racing picture was made. And you could see just over my shoulder there's a little rise in the shadow there. And that's where the flag raising act took place. Right. And I shot that photograph somewhere closer to that red vehicle there with a longer lens. And so that's an important photograph, and it kind of really it takes my breath away to go back. All these years later to that moment in time in history.
I know, there's always that moment where we all have to take a breath. I mean, I had just moved to Jersey City, and I was living right across the river, right by Newport Plaza there. And I photographed it from the Jersey side. And I don't show my work when I show my photographer's work, but there's a double spread photo of the silhouette of Manhattan after both towers came down that I took in the 9/11 book for the New York Times. Well, my point is that morning I was standing there with a gentleman who didn't know if his friends, if his family ever got out of the World Trade Center, and we grabbed each other and we hugged and we cried, and then I started photographing because there was so much. I mean, how all of us controlled any emotions that day. It was unbelievable. The bodies of work, the amount of work that was done that day by photographers, but what an effort, a Herculean effort by photojournalists and even amateur photographers that day.
Yeah, well, two things about that. One, it was the hardest day that I've ever encountered as a photographer, and I definitely broke down a couple of times that day. It was extremely difficult to compartmentalize your emotions and perform your job. It was very apparent to me that what we were doing as photojournalists that day was really important. And documenting that day was, well, that's what I do for a living, but that was the job that day. But I also knew at the same time that, you know, my older brother worked in near the World Trade Center, had usually commuted through that building in the morning, and I was concerned about his whereabouts. And I knew, just like off the top of my head, that there were dozens of people that I knew who worked in those buildings, you know, and I was concerned about my photojournalist friends as well. David Hanchu comes to mind, and I distinctly remembered worrying about David because I knew what a news hound he was, and he would be there. And so when I was watching this all unfold from across the river, it was it had packed all the emotions that you would imagine or associate with it. The other thing I wanted to say is that for the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I produced a documentary film on the photographers of 9/11. I interviewed a number of photographers, certainly not all the photographers that covered that day.
Yeah, and that's called Witness to History, right?
Witness to History, yeah. And so I'm very proud of that documentary. It won a couple of video awards, but it really is a testament to the grit of some of the great photographers that day. Aris Economopoulos comes to mind, and many, many others. And
may I show a small clip of that right now?
Absolutely.
I'm going to show a small clip for everybody on the part that incorporates Ricky Flores and you talking about the flag.
Ricky and Laurie Grinker. There's so many.
Laurie Grinker, and exactly. And Aristide, it's too long to show everything, but I will show a quick clip. So let's do that right now. I'm going to mute myself.
The flag-raising picture was made at 5 o'clock on September 11th. The Trade Center building number 7 was going to fall, so the search and rescue effort at Ground Zero was halted.
I'm exploring the room, overlooking the side, and then walking over to the tunnel, I see firefighters climbing onto the trailer.
And I saw these 3 firemen kind of on the southwest corner edge of where the rubble was from the World Trade Center. And I saw them fumbling with this flag. And just then, the flag went up.
And began to photograph from there. And it was myself, and Laurie Grinker was the other photographer.
It went up very quickly. It went up without any sort of performance. And I shot a burst of pictures of the flag being raised with the World Trade Center rubble in the background.
Pretty much at that point, I was on auto drive. I was shooting. You know, I knew I had to get a photograph. I began to shoot and shoot.
The 3 firemen did not know the picture was even being taken. There were no words exchanged between me and them. They raised the flag. I shot the picture, and it was over. It was over that quickly.
I don't think that at the time, that image in itself was one of the most significant ones for me.
It wasn't until the next morning, when the phones were ringing off the hook, that I started to get an idea that this picture was getting a lot of attention. From the next moment forward, this picture has lived a life of its own. The level of interest in this picture was just off the charts.
It never felt like it was a flag raising to a victory. You know, it never felt like it was like, you know, our brothers died here that day. We're going to raise this flag in their honor.
That, you know, that the rest of the documentary that you did, I ask everybody to go to Tom's website. We've been showing it on the bottom here, thomasefranklin.com. Go to his video section. Check out all of the incredible documentaries he's done, including Witnesses to History.
Yeah. Stan, I just want to point out though that's a small excerpt from the film. The film's not about me. It's
No, no, no.
I'm part of the thing, but the first 3 minutes of that document are very powerful, where I use the tape recordings of the police dispatches,
Right.
and I use that as the soundtrack to take us through the day. And you know, the testimony of some of the photographers, particularly in the first couple of minutes of that film, is very powerful.
Yes, if you want, I could show it now. If not, we could, you know.
The first couple of minutes, you know, particularly, you know, until to the part where Bob Cummins speaks, that's really powerful.
Okay, hold on one second. Let's show it. This is your show, and this is your, you know, what. Let's do it.
I would just say while you're queuing that up that it's heavy. You know, it's very heavy. It'll transport you back to that day.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Just so you know, folks, if you, we are going to show a couple of images from 9/11. If anybody feels that they will be disturbed by this because of the memories, please feel free to tune out. We do not want to do that to anybody, but this is.
It's not graphic, but it's.
I know. I'm just letting people know that if they feel heavy about it, they should tune out. And that's that. So hold on one second.
We just had a plane crash into Upper 4 of the World Trade Center.
It was the most widely observed event by media in history.
To transmit a second alarm and start relocating companies into the area.
10-4 Battalion 1. Get a phone call at 8:55 from our photo editor, and she told me a plane was in the tower.
And I knew that something really bad was going down.
And it was one of our photo editors, and she said, a plane's hit the World Trade Center, bag the fashion show, you have to go.
I followed behind Rescue Company 1, big red fire truck with their lights going, their sirens going.
The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. The whole outside of the building was just a huge explosion.
There were firefighters arriving, pulling hoses, going into the building, ambulances, police cars showing up.
Send every available ambulance, everything you got to the World Trade Center now.
The whole New York City skyline was engulfed with smoke.
There was no doubt in my mind that those firefighters would climb into the building, rescue people, put out the fire.
We have fire on several floors, the upper floors of the World Trade Center.
Put the lens on the camera, filming the camera as I walked to the balcony. At that point, I saw a plane approaching Lower Manhattan.
I waited until the instant that plane got in front of the tower.
I lifted the camera, deciding I'm going to take a picture of the plane juxtaposed against the city.
It appears an airplane crashed into the World Trade Center.
I went, holy shit. I said, that was the plane.
I knew I saw it, I knew I witnessed it, but was I really seeing what I photographed?
It was just staggering to me. I couldn't believe that I actually caught that plane.
It's the 1st Battalion transmitted that it looked like it was intentional. It's going into the box. It could be a terrorist attack.
It just became amazingly obvious that this wasn't an accident.
And I said, I have a picture. And a man says, oh my God, that's a commercial jetliner. And then another man walked up to me behind me and he said, my God, he said, you have the picture.
Pretty heavy stuff.
Sort of a nuclear attack.
Pretty heavy stuff. But you know what? We lived through it, and many didn't. Sorry, I'm getting choked up, as we all do. So, you know, wow, Tom. I mean, you know, that what you did there, multimedia-wise, is award-winning work. Really, really powerful. I think that's the power of multimedia, and hats off to you for putting together such an important and incredible mini documentary.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
No, listen, I'm glad you wanted to show it. I you know, had certain things selected, but I'm glad we went there and showed it. It's that powerful. So,
yeah, you know, I'll just say, Steph, you know, this time of year for us, you, me, you know, those of us who are New Yorkers, I'm a native New Yorker. This time of year is really, really difficult.
Yeah.
And,
No, hey, listen, my mom's retired NYPD. I know a ton of cops. Jimmy Leahy from the 6th Precinct, who I knew and worked with around with the guys from the 6th Precinct, lost his life in 9/11. God bless Jimmy. God bless everybody who lost their lives that day, public and civil service. But anyway,
hey, let me just say one other thing. I saw one of the questions here was, how does it feel to have taken an iconic picture or an iconic picture for all time? Here's what I'll say about that. It's a bittersweet thing because the photograph speaks for itself, and the photograph's not about me. It's about people's connection to seeing it and what it, the emotions that it makes them feel. And I have great respect for that, and it's wonderful that something that I created would touch people in that way.
Right.
But I went on to continue to do my job as a photojournalist, and for years, every day somebody would recognize me or make a connection between me and that photograph and want to talk about what had happened to them that day and the tragedies that unfolded as a result of it. And it has never ceased to amaze me at how profound, the events of 9/11 are, particularly on people in this part of the country.
Yeah, no, I mean, it really does. I mean, from many people on Staten Island, this to recognize the Staten Island Historical Society was from their website here. People memorialized it on their arms, on their backs, everywhere to remember that day and never, ever, as we always say, forget that day. I thank God every day that David lived through that. We know Hanshu, he's one of the great guys, and that Todd, the photos that Todd took that day, Todd Maisel took of David. That must have been one of the most difficult, if most difficult things in a photographer's life, to photograph a colleague lying on the ground and continue to shoot, because we have to document what we do. But that must have been arduous on Todd Maisel,
Well, Todd is a great news photographer and a dogged, determined, dedicated photojournalist, as is David. And the photographs that Todd made of David being, after he was injured are just very, very powerful.
Oh, I know. And, and then we're not even going to talk about, I mean, we could, but we could take hours of that, months and months of more photos and editing and everything. Oh man, I tell you, it was hard sleeping every night, going home, editing those photos every single night for months on end.
Yeah, that video also featured a lot of Aris Economopoulos' photographs, who was with the Star Ledger.
Yes.
His pictures are epic, and, he had a very rough experience in that day as well.
Yes, no, the stories are endless. So my question to you is, this is my question, is there were several photos and angles, as we know, of various first responders raising the flags of Ground Zero. And what do you think made your photo take on a life of its own, as you're quoted as saying, in that it did? But that's my question to you. And the reason I say that is I'm a collector of everything 9/11 because of what we lived through. And I mean, there's photos ranging from the PBA magazine of ESU guys. I have, I collect all this stuff because it's history for us and life. Your photo on Life. Then there's, of course, Lori Grinkers, right? Correct?
Yeah.
And on and on and on. The U.S. News and World Report one. So answer that, Tom. I mean, talk to us about that, please.
So that's a great question. So as far as I know, that myself, Ricky Flores, and Lori Grinker, the three photographers who made a still photograph of the firemen raising their flag. Mm-hmm. Lori's and Ricky's are very powerful photographs. There's a horizontal, and they're taken from a higher angle looking down on the three firemen, and their pictures show the scene and the setting very well, and it's very illustrative of what was going on there. Mm-hmm. My photograph was taken from a low angle with a long lens and very much from a frontal perspective. Right. I think my photograph caught a lot of attention for three reasons. One, it was shot with a longer lens and compressed all that space and really showed the firemen up close. Two, it looked very similar to Joe Rosenthal's Iwo Jima photograph. And of course, I get asked that question all the time. I was very familiar with Joe's photograph. I got to meet Joe after, you know, I had made my picture, and he was a wonderful man, but he did not want to talk about that photograph. But nonetheless, my picture looked a lot like his. And I think third, the reason why all three of our photographs became very well known is that these images showed something different on what had happened from 9/11, right? The other iconic images, most of which are in my documentary, you know, like Richard Drew's, you know, the falling man photograph, those were really hard photographs to look at, and they were about the destruction and what had happened. Whereas our photographs were about this other emotion, this feeling that people would get from these three firemen who were essentially the soldiers in this battle. Right. They're doing something that symbolizes something different. And a lot of people tell me that they see patriotism and resilience and strength and more of a positive message from looking at this picture. And I think those are driving factors. The other thing that I think has driven the popularity of my photograph was that the photo editor at my newspaper, Rich Geely, he shared the photograph on the AP Wire in the early hours of September 12th. And so my photograph got to publications on the West Coast and around the world before their deadlines, and it was widely published. Right. And the next morning, when I reported for work the next morning, after just a couple of hours of sleep, was the phones were ringing off the hook, and thus began an odyssey of media attention that I would argue that has not been, you know, that was unprecedented. I mean, hundreds of phone calls. The Record had to hire people to answer the phone calls in the mail. And for me, it was a very strange time for the obvious reasons, but also the fact that I was suddenly, you know, put into this spotlight of being a spokesperson for the picture and for photographs on 9/11. I went on the Today Show a number of times and every major news program, and we had to hire publicists just to handle all the requests. And I just mentioned that to illustrate just the fascination that people had with this picture, and it still happens. I mean, I got a phone call yesterday from a man in Florida just wanting to ask and talk about the picture. Well, so it ceases to amaze me at how 9/11 continues to resonate with people.
Right. Well, I'm sure. I'm trying to figure out why we're getting an echo here. That's bizarre.
I don't hear it.
Okay, I do. Anyway, if you don't hear it, that's good. But you know, the thing that's really, you know, this time of the year, like you said, conjures up so much with so many people. I'm sure you get emails and phone calls every year around this time of the year. So it's something that we'll always live with, you know, but thank God for the photographers that documented it. Thank God for the writers that did the incredible stories of reporting it. And thank God for all the first responders and everybody that did their job that day and more than their job. They sacrificed it all. So on that note, we have a lot more to cover. But one of the things I want to do at this point is reintroduce everybody. My name is Stefan Kaplan. I'm a social media and visual strategist. Welcome to the Spin It Social Hour. My guest, I am honored to say today, is Tom Franklin, Thomas E. Franklin, who's a professor at Montclair State University and a longtime photojournalist and a resident here in Ramsey, where I live. And it's wonderful to have him on. But also, please share this broadcast and let everybody know about Tom and the other work we're going to show and that we're going to talk about, because Tom has done a lot, and we want his name and his body of work to get out there. So while we're at it, let's go to, I'm going to go here. Actually, let's take some questions. If we have any questions, Jonathan, we can bring a couple of questions or comments up. Neil Parekh asks, who works with Sri Srinivasan and us at DigiMentors, do you always have two cameras, presumably with different lenses? Good thing you had a backup, he asks.
Yeah, so most photojournalists carry two cameras, and usually a wide-angle zoom is on one and a telephoto zoom is on the other. And Neil also asked, I see in the questions there, what were the camera settings for that picture? And those were the questions that my phone call from Florida yesterday.
Oh, wow.
Wanted to ask. That's funny. So I know the answers right off the top of my head because I just answered. It was taken with an early model digital camera called a Canon D2000. I was one of the early digital camera users when the news industry started to go towards digital, and this camera weighed quite a lot and was kind of clunky, and they used these big fat data cards that almost looked like almost the size of my phone to record images.
Right.
And I had a big one, 56 megabytes, which today wouldn't hold one single picture.
Wouldn't hold a single photo these days.
And they were awful, and they would frequently corrupt. And then the picture was taken
more these days.
Yeah. And the picture was taken at 5:01 p.m. on the 11th. It was taken from roughly I was standing at the corner of Liberty and just west of West Street. Although the streets were not recognizable at that time. And it was made with a 70-200 zoom lens with a 1x converter. And I was standing about 30 yards away.
Yeah, no. Vincent LaFerre is watching. Welcome, Vincent, a previous guest. And my ex-colleague and always friend. Vincent, whoa, go back. Let's have that other one from Vincent. Would love to hear about this image's path to becoming a U.S. stamp. We were going to get to that, actually, Vincent. And what's the other one from Vincent there, I see? Thomas, haven't really called him Tom. Sorry, Thomas.
Vince is a very talented photographer, and I draw inspiration from photographers like him all the time.
Absolutely. I had him on earlier, and what a body of work, an incredible technical photographer. But Tom, to answer his question, the path about the path to the stamp. How did that come about?
So after 9/11, obviously, the Postage U.S. Postal Service had contacted me, asking me about using the photograph for the image, and the image was actually owned by the newspaper. So the Postal Service picked a number of images, illustrations, and presented them to President Bush. Mm-hmm. And President Bush selected my photograph, and then the three firemen and myself were invited to the White House for a press conference unveiling. So it was really a great honor to be a guest in the Oval Office, and that was one of just a handful of times that I was in, that I've met the three firemen. And the president was really awesome. I mean, he invited us to stay and hang out in the Oval Office afterwards. And quick little funny story is that while we were there after the press conference ended, the president asked us to hang out, and we did. And he was like giving us a little tour of the Oval Office, and there was a lot of interesting historical things about that. And at one point, the three firemen we were there with our spouses too, and the three firemen pulled out copies of the photo, and they asked the president to sign it. And so the president turns to me and he goes, "What about you? You're the photographer. Where are your pictures?" And I said, well, they wouldn't let me bring my camera in, so I figured they wouldn't let me bring my photos in. Anyway, the president was really pretty cool about it. He pulled out a piece of official White House stationery, and he signed something to my son, Sean. And it was really one of the really cool memories. And the stamp is, and very important to answer Vince's question. Yes. So once the stamp was selected, it was a semi-postal stamp, which means that proceeds from the stamp went to help victims of 9/11, raised over $10 million. And much of that money did go to help people who were affected by 9/11, but a lot of the money was then transferred over to help victims of Katrina. Okay. And so FEMA had reallocated some of that money as well, over $10 million.
Okay. One of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to bring Jonathan on for a second to let everybody see who's been driving the car behind the scenes here. And Jonathan, welcome. Welcome.
Hello.
Jonathan is my co-producer and has tremendous help fielding all the questions with the setup of the show, comments, et cetera, et cetera. And Jonathan, tell us something about yourself real quick.
I am a full-time flaneur, a sometime writer, and part-time tech.
You are, and a big, big help, and I appreciate it. I love having you as my co-producer. So, Jonathan, do you have a question for Tom?
I have a change of pace question.
Okay.
You have covered natural disasters or terrorist attacks such as 9/11. You've covered the refugee crisis, which is decades long at this point. You have a exhibition about heroin addiction. You've also covered pollution in northern New Jersey. What do you photograph that is for relief, for humor, or for upbeat notes?
That's a great question, Jonathan. I like to photograph things every day that inspire me or catch my eye. I mean, I carry a camera with me at all times. If not, I'll use my phone. Sometimes I'm attracted to things because of the light. Sometimes it's because of the subject matter. I am interested in making images of everything and many things in everyday life. I do really like working on projects that are going to have some sort of social impact. You mentioned the heroin addiction project that I'd worked on, which was mostly a video project for me. And it was a really gritty street level type of reporting that was enormously challenging. But that is one of my favorite projects that I've ever worked on. Why? Because I was able to really, really immerse myself in the subject matter. I essentially was walking on the streets where there was, and essentially an open air drug market every day. And that required almost like a different type of mindset than I had normally taken. And so, when you can get immersed in something that you're passionate about, then that gets to the point where, good work and great work happens.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, actually, we're going to quickly show that just a few frames from that, because I think it's important since you just spoke about it. Here are some of the frames from that work that you did. I didn't queue up the video, but I had worked up some frames from this project you worked on, this documentary on heroin and the horrible nature of it and effects that and what it does to people's lives. Tom, you want to elaborate?
Yeah. So the project wasn't, hey, heroin's really bad. The project was about kind of this nuanced aspect of what was going on in North Jersey. The fourth ward in Patterson at that time was an area where there were lots of vacant properties. And when there are lots of vacant properties, drugs happen because the dealers have a place to stash, the users have a place to buy, and everybody has a place to hide from the police. And there's also a place for people to use. And so the project focused on a couple of different aspects. One, there were all these vacant properties there, and that essentially supported the drug trade. Two, there were a new crop of drug users from the suburbs, mostly white kids in the fourth ward, which is a predominantly black neighborhood. And so what happens when you become hooked on heroin is you eventually become homeless. And if you're homeless, where do you go to live? You go to abandoned properties. So Patterson's fourth ward had this strange dichotomy of white suburban kids coming, and not just kids, these two are adults, coming from the suburbs to the fourth ward to buy drugs. And at that time, Patterson, you could buy heroin for $3 a bag. And so I had followed a number of users over the course of many months and told the story from a couple of different perspectives, from the user perspective, also from the police's perspective, as well as the landowners, the property owners, the real estate developers like that one, Charles Florio, who was buying up large sections of properties in the fourth ward as a means of trying to clean up the neighborhood, but also to turn a profit. And he would describe about how, no sooner would he start to renovate a piece of real estate, people would break in, rip the copper out of the wall, steal the wires, and how it was this kind of vicious cycle of properties being ripped and torn down. It was a very fascinating project, and I would encourage everybody to take a look at it. I worked on it for the record. Multimedia site is no longer up, but you can see the videos. I did a series of a dozen videos, small vignettes, 5 to 6 minute pieces that told different aspects of the story. One day I followed a heroin user panhandling in Patterson, and he demonstrated essentially how he raises money. And then he was mic'd up during a drug transaction. And a lot of it is really street gritty stuff. And it's a project that I'm really proud of.
All right. Well, Jonathan, thank you for your question. And we will see you. Okay, a tip of the hat to you, Jonathan. So that was one question. We have a couple of other viewers that have a couple of questions. Let's bring one on, and then we're going to get back to some more about your body of work here. Let's bring on right here. Let's bring on Seshu. Hi, how are you?
Hi guys, how are you?
Hi Seshu. You doing well today?
Thank you very much. Yes, thanks for doing this, Stefan. And
no problem.
Mr. Franklin, thank you so much. I've been an admirer of your work for many years. As a student at Ohio University and also at Indiana University, we've always looked at work of working photojournalists, and this is exciting for me to be able to talk to you. So thank you so much for taking my question. I think you'll agree that photojournalism is a difficult and sometimes dangerous job for a lot of working photojournalists around the world. Knowing what you know of what this position, this job entails, would you go back and do it all over again?
Oh, wow. Hey, so that's a great question. If you're asking me, would I go back and do it all over again? Absolutely. I have never for a day in my life doubted that this was what I was meant to do. I feel very passionate. It began with photography, and then it morphed into more of a multimedia type of storytelling and video storytelling. I love what I do. I feel passionate about what I do, and I would encourage anybody who is passionate about photography, or really whatever their passion is, to pursue it, right? I now teach, and this week, I usually begin with talking about one of the people that gives me inspiration, Malcolm Gladwell. And Malcolm Gladwell, who wrote a book, Outliers, which essentially put forth the theory that you need to put in 10,000 hours of anything to be good at something. And so I think that once you start working on your 10,000 hours, your passion develops, skill starts to really form. And it's akin to a snowball rolling down a hill. And, snowball will start out small, but once it starts rolling down the hill, it picks up new knowledge, new information, right, new skills, new ideas, new approaches. And once you figure out what it is you want to do, get your snowball rolling down a hill.
I think Chris, you had a second part to your question.
Yeah, a follow-up question, and is that for those who are thinking or considering photojournalism as a career, the next generation of young photojournalists, perhaps, how should they better be prepared to embrace what's in front of them? I mean, we're talking not just obviously the content aspect of it, but also the business side of things. I think a lot of photographers, and me included, we were passionate for sure about the photography and clearly interested in making photographs that mean something and mean something for our community that we live in. But ultimately, we got to pay bills. And, that's one of the hardest things about being a photojournalist, I think now, is that the papers are dying and a closing shop. Magazines don't pay really almost anything for photographs. I've had a friend of mine online tell me that some of the well-known newspapers that have published her photographs from all the protests that she's been to, she's only made like $5. Okay, I mean you can't live like that. So where are we at in terms of educating the next generation to think a little bit about, okay, the passion is there. We got to pursue stories that mean something, but there's also got to be the business side of things where we got to make money somehow.
Right.
Okay, so that's a great, multifaceted question. So
yeah, sorry for the long-winded question.
No, but this is a great topic to talk about. So clearly, the old model, the model that Stefan and I, cut our teeth on, that model has changed, and some would argue it's never coming back. Right. So we now have access to all these great tools and platforms, right? We can record stories and photographs and pictures in so many different ways. I really believe it's up to the next generation now to figure out a way to make the economy, the economic aspect of this really work. I really do believe that that's where the answer lies. I also think that, storytellers like us, like the three of us, we've got to reinvent ourselves to a certain degree. We've got to figure out different ways
100%.
Make this work economically. I'll just give you an example, right? So I teach, but I also do, a lot of freelance work. I know, just like you said, there's not money to be made in freelance, documentary work.
No.
But but one of the things that I do is I look for grants. If I wanted to, so I'll give you an example. So last spring, on my spring break from college, I wanted to go to the border in Tijuana and San Diego. So I sought out some grant money. I got some grant money. It wasn't a lot of money, but it covered my airfare. I had lined up with a nonprofit to do a documentary video on an immigration lawyer there that was receiving grant money or fellowship money from them. So I knew I was going to produce a short piece from them. And then while I was there, I did a freelance story that was published in the LA Times, and I had video that was published as well. Now, I realize that a lot of that is circumstantial and it's up to chance, but I ended up making money on that trip. Not a lot, but I made enough money to pursue my passion, which is to do that type of storytelling. My main gig right now is teaching, and I think that's a really good example of how you can diversify what it is that you want to do and still do the kind of work that you want to do. Now, I will say that those are not easy, and I have lots of connections and experience to try and make those things happen, but that's the type of thinking I think it requires today. And reinventing yourself, being adaptable, being versatile, being able to produce, edit, shoot video as a one-man band is a big part of it as well. And you got to hustle. I mean, it's so about hustle, and it is not easy. It's harder than ever to do this kind of work, but the demand for storytelling is greater than ever. So I do believe that if we recognize that the demand for storytelling is as great as it's ever been, that the model needs to be built to support that.
Wow!
And whether it's the Netflixes of the world or the television, all the programming that's going on, there has to be a way to make the economics of this work.
What an explanation! Incredible question, answer, and everything. So, Seshu, thank you very much. We've been showing your website at the bottom before. Everybody, Seshu is a wonderful photographer, and people should check him out at his website. Which is seshuphotography.com. That's SEASHU photography.com. Seshu, take care of yourself, and thank you for coming on.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks, Franklin. Thank you.
All right. So, Tom, what I want to do now, before we get to the next question from Charles Chesler soon, is I wanted to go through some of the work here on your incredible project, which is now being shown at the Patterson Museum. It's live online. You've worked incredibly hard on this project for 5 or 6 years at least?
6 years.
Yeah, and I want to get to it now because we want to dig into it and we want to show this body of work. And I'm going to let you talk about it as I go through it. And why don't you tell everybody about Seeking Refuge and this body of work that we're going to see?
So in 2015, I was asked to write an opinion piece for Vice. You may recall there was a photograph of a young Syrian child who had drowned while trying to seek asylum in the EU with his family. And this amazing series of photographs with this young child was circulating around the world. And it really caught, the world's attention. And so Vice asked me to write an opinion piece about how, iconic photographs like this the question was, can they, persuade public opinion or change people's perspective or draw attention? And that got me thinking about the Syrian refugee crisis. And so I started doing local reporting here in New Jersey about where, Syrian refugees were being settled in New Jersey. And we have a large Syrian community here. So I did a cross-platform piece for NJ Spotlight, focusing on a group of Syrians who were being resettled here. And through that reporting, I found a Jewish group that had adopted these Muslim families, and this unique, relationship had formed. And so from there, I then went to Greece, to Athens, and to Lesbos, Greece, which was Lesbos was like the ground zero of the Syrian crisis. And I did a series of reports there focusing on families who were living or getting out of some of the refugee camps while their asylum cases were heard. I focused on one family in particular that was receiving money from a nonprofit called Human Wire. And Human Wire would connect donors here in the States with actual families like this family right here, the Al Ramoun family. And they would help them move out of a refugee camp and get settled in a legitimate apartment in Athens. And so I was doing that kind of reporting. One interesting story that I worked on that came as a result of this family is that I had, through my reporting, discovered that the CEO of this organization, Human Wire, was allegedly stealing money from the organization. And so I partnered with the Denver Post. I shared this information and this reporting that I had, and we did an expose on him. And eventually, you know, he charged with a crime for taking money from this organization. And so that's the type of reporting that I've done. And then as I was really diving into the crisis going on over there, I started to focus on the migrants from Central America. And, you know, after the election of President Trump, this became a very hot button topic. And
hey, Tom, on that note, before we go too deep into that, I want to, because you were talking about your work in Greece, why don't we pause there for 1 second? I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to follow the sequence here. Let me show a clip from this so that people can see a bit of this. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to stop the screen here. We are going to, I'm going to mute myself.
I think what you're queuing up is the film "The World Arrived at Our Doorstep." Well, the world arrived at our doorstep is a documentary video I did on a British couple that was living in Lesvos and were helping refugees arrive, and at the same time they were being vilified by the locals in Lesvos for helping them, for quote unquote encouraging them. They literally helped hundreds of thousands of refugees, you know, arrive safely on the shores there and make their way for processing for asylum.
And then when our daughter was born, we decided we would come and try and make a life to bring our daughter up here.
I think in the, you know, these days it's really difficult to have time to be a family. So like in the UK, you're both working, your kids are with strangers from when they're tiny. And we wanted to actually be parents. We wanted to spend time with our daughter while she was growing up, because those years are so fast and so precious that, and this seemed the ideal place. And then things changed a little bit in 2015. Well, the world arrived on our doorstep after years of an insulated life. This started for us, you know, we're taking our daughter to school at sort of 6:30 in the morning because she had a big commute to school. And we're driving to the end of that road and there's women and kids on the beach. And suddenly we've got Syrians and Iraqis, Afghans, all fleeing war, all with their own story, all different religions. And you cannot, as a human, drive past people in need like that. You just can't do it. So we stopped and we started to help. And we haven't got much. So we were giving them our clothes, my daughter's clothes, whatever food that we could get together. And it started from what was a few boats a week to a few boats a day to 10 boats a day. And in October, the maximum we had was 200. And we actually watched people drown with no way of helping because there's no rescue boats here. There's one Coast Guard boat in Molivos with one crew that was then, by sort of May, was working 12 hours shifts just picking up people, and they couldn't cope and nobody came.
So I just wanted to show that. So now, you know, now you can continue, if you may, if it's okay, with the part of now dealing with refugees from Latin America and everything else, and the migrants from Latin America. So go ahead. I'm going to put that back up.
Yeah. So just to close the loop on that documentary. So I had gone to Lesvos by myself to do reporting, but I was also joined by a couple other faculty members and students from Montclair State, and they did their own video reporting. This is something that some of my faculty members, David Sanders and Steve McCarthy, and I have done, where we take students to, crisis areas like this to do reporting. And it's a way in which I intertwine my teaching with my professional work. And so students help me produce the documentary, and at the same time, we mentored them as they produce their own pieces.
That's
and then,
fantastic.
yeah, it's really, it's a great opportunity as a professor, as a teacher, to teach like that, because it's all immersive. We're there, we're 24/7 together, and the students get to really experience, what we do as photojournalists.
Right.
So the connection. So in 2018, I started to make the connection between the plight of migrants trying to get to the U.S.,
right,
seeking better life for themselves, and the refugees from places like Syria and the Middle East trying to get to the EU. And there was a lot of commonality with it. And so in 2017, I had an opportunity to teach in Guadalajara, Mexico, which is in the central part of the country. And while I was there, I did reporting that's where this picture was made, of migrants who would ride on the trains. And there are other photojournalists who have done this type of work. Don Bartletti, in particular, won a Pulitzer Prize for his documentation of migrants riding the trains. But I saw this as an opportunity to teach and also do some reporting from that location. And one of the people in that photograph, he was trying to get from Honduras back to Miami, where he had family. He had a family there. He had gone back to Honduras to take care of his ailing father, and now was trying to cross back illegally to the United States to rejoin his family. Mm-hmm. And so this was, a big theme in the story. And I've actually stayed in touch with him. He has not successfully made it back to the U.S. He did sneak across about a year ago, but was captured and sent back to Honduras. Wow. And he's determined to come back. And, we can sit here and argue and discuss, the politics of this. But at the very core, here is a guy who has lived most of his life in the United States, has no criminal record, and he has here, and he has a job here. Right. And so, this is a very real situation that it goes on, that plays out every day, on both sides of the border in this country.
Well, that's the core of it. They're human beings who are looking for a better life. And we can sit here, like you said, and many people could debate us left and right on pros and cons and everything else. But many of these people, many migrants, many immigrants have been demonized in many ways for simply seeking a new way of life.
Yeah, I mean, at the core, this man was trying to resume a better life for himself, and he, has no life in Honduras. He said that, that he has pressure there to be a participant in the drug trade. He said that's really the only way in which you can make money there, and he didn't want that kind of life. He wanted.
That's an incredible photograph, by the way. It really, you're an amazing photographer, Tom, and we're blessed to have you doing what you do to document this type of work. While we're doing this, we've got about 15 minutes left, and we're going to go through some other work. But let me quickly bring on another person who's been wanting to ask you a question. This is Charles Chesler from New York City, who's also a photographer. And Charles has a question for you. Hello, Charles.
Hi, Stefan. How are you?
Good. I'm so sorry to make you wait, but we had to get through a bunch of stuff.
No worries. This is amazing. Thomas, really wonderful to meet you.
Thanks, Charles.
I'm sitting here being overcome with emotion. It's the effect that the work has. And so my questions, I'm not a photojournalist, but very emotional about stuff. I had a nice question all set up about dealing with your emotions while your camera is focused on such heartbreaking and sometimes horrific things. But you touched on that very early in the interview. But I wanted to ask perhaps another question, which is about gaining trust with the refugees, or when you're dealing with the heroin epidemic and following people, how it's got to be a key element, and it comes from who you are. I love photographing people, so I get that. And I was wondering if you could address that a little bit, because the work is just so profound.
So that's a great question. I don't really have a concrete answer on that. I think it has to do with, humanity. And I try to just be transparent with people and let them know who I am, what I'm doing, and what my goal is. I always try to keep a camera around my neck. I do not want to confuse people on the fact of on what my role is. The campfire photograph here is actually a good photo to talk about. So the gentleman who's lying down there on the ground there, he was the subject of my reporting. I had met him in a refugee in a migrant shelter in Guadalajara, which is in the central part of Mexico. And over the course of a couple of days of just talking to him and connecting with him on a very human level, he trusted me, right? And I trusted him, right? Most importantly, I trusted him. And so when he told me he was ready to leave the shelter, and him and a group of people that he had met there were going to go leave the shelter and go jump on trains, moving trains, to make their way to the border, I went with him. That's actually his posse there. Posse's not the right word. His group of friends that he had met there, and they're walking their way to the border. This is another migrant from Honduras. And he was showing me how he jumps on the trains, and so this type of reporting requires, I think, just being honest with people and straightforward with people. And going back to my heroin project, that this came up a lot, because people would say, how do you gain the trust of drug dealers? Because I had connected with a drug dealer who I was able to interview and report on. And I just find that trying to connect with them on a very human level can be very effective. And sometimes it takes time, right? With the heroin project, it took in one case, there were, Stefan had showed a photograph of a heroin user earlier. It took that guy like 5 or 6 encounters with me before he agreed to take my picture, and everything from cursing to him throwing me. And then one day he was like, yeah, I'm okay with it. And there was another heroin user who I had done a lot of reporting on, and he right away said, you know what? My life sucks. This is awful. To be a user living homeless and on the streets of Patterson, living in abandoned buildings, is awful. And I want people to learn from this. So he was a guy who had that kind of awareness, and thought, sharing his story with others would teach people or teach them a lesson. I think that's where he came from. And also at the same time, the newspaper that I was working for, they wanted releases, and I couldn't get releases from the people I was reporting on. It just wouldn't have happened. And so I was able to get them on camera saying things like, I want people to see this and learn from this. And so from a legal perspective, we had protection because we had him actually on camera saying, why he was talking to us, why he allowed me to put a mic on him when he went on a drug transaction. And so, it's all part of the game. Your question is all part of the game. It's connecting with people. It's being transparent about what your intentions are. And it's putting those 10,000 hours in, the Malcolm Gladwell thing, which is always in the back of my mind, is that you don't just drop in an open air drug market with your camera and say, hey guys, I'm here. No, it requires strategy and professionalism and nuance
and real empathy.
Yeah, and empathy, of course, and it's all of those things combined, and the years of experience too, of knowing how to judge the situations. Because remember, Tom, myself, other people in the many years we've been doing this have put ourselves in some very precarious situations. And very dangerous situations, myself included. But you develop. I'm not going to say this, but yeah, I'm going to say this. You develop that spidey sense. It's like that sense that you get. When to pull back, when you can go a little further, when you've gained the trust to a certain degree, because these can be dangerous situations. But anyway, Charles, thank you so much for your question.
Thank you for this whole series, and thank you, Thomas.
No, thank you for being a big supporter of the show, and we'll see you soon. Okay, Charles?
Okay.
By the way, everybody, Charles is teaching. We've been showing it below, but Charles is teaching a workshop next week, I believe, at B&H Photo. Right, Charles?
September 8th. It's a one light flash thing. Outdoors.
Okay, look up B&H and Charles Chesler and check him out, folks. A wonderful photographer. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Stefan.
Okay, bye-bye. So, Tom, thank you for taking that question. With the time we have left, about another 12 minutes or so, I would say, before we go too long here, let's go through the rest of this so people understand the rest of the context of what you did here.
Yeah, so the picture that we're looking at now is a photograph that I made from Tijuana in 2018, and this is a migrant who had just arrived in one of the migrant caravans that were, so much in the news at that time, and he had squeezed through an opening in the border wall on the beach there that essentially divides, San Diego County from Tijuana. And someone had handed him his young daughter, and he made this, mad dash down the beach carrying his child, and somehow eluded Border Patrol. And this was an incredibly dramatic scene that unfolded in front of my camera. I shot video of it and photographs. It was published in the LA Times and the San Diego Tribune. And I've actually been able to connect with that guy through social media. And he's living in the United States. He made it successfully across. And, that was a really pivotal scene that I photographed. And it spoke to the fact that, one of the topics, the themes I was exploring was, well, this idea of a wall does not seem really practical to me. And I wanted to explore that. And here I was there, and just on like my third day, and I witnessed somebody successfully sneak through a wall crossing that was on the ocean, that had pillars buried in the sand. You can see the wall right there in that photograph. You can go back.
Right.
And it had a dead zone on the other side of the wall, on the United States side, that was patrolled by Border Patrol. There was a second wall, which you can see there, all with barbed wire. And yet here was the guy who got through this fortified, wall. And, it just, and here's one of the migrants so the next day after I had photographed that, and it was in the papers, others had found this opening in the wall and did the same thing and snuck through, and they were all captured, and they were going to be sent back to their home countries.
Right. Well, I wanted to show it full frame here.
Yeah. And so, like I said, through social media, I've been able to connect with that man who has a family here, but he knew he was crossing illegally and just thought that, the prospects of a better life. Yes.
Right. Well, that is incredible. I mean, and that's where the social media part comes into this whole equation. I mean, it's incredible how we can connect with everybody, stay connected with everybody, even subjects that we photograph like this. That's a story in and of itself right there, that you were able to connect with this gentleman after the horrible journey. I mean, listen, he made it, thank God. But the stress.
There's so many. This is what I love about storytelling, right? There were so many aspects of that story that were really interesting. I'll just throw one out there real quickly, because this is really interesting for journalists. Is that after he had snuck through and run down the beach and disappeared into the horizon, we met up with one of the migrants who had traveled with him from Honduras, and so he confirmed, that who he was, what his name was, what his backstory was, and why he did what he did. And he connected with us. We exchanged cell phone information with his friend. Later that night, he called me and my translator, Carla, and essentially said he had made it safely to the first town, and that if we wanted, we could go interview him if we would drive him to Los Angeles. So now we had an ethical dilemma. Do we go and get this interview and photographs and video, or do we, maintain our lane, which is the storyteller and not the enabler?
Right.
And so we had this really complex dynamic had unfolded right in front of us.
Right. Well, tell us, with the stories. I tell you, we need 5 hours for this. The body of work and the stories that come out of it, like you said. But tell us about these next two segments, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. But this is Angels at the Border, volunteer groups that offer much needed assistance, and how they came into play with some of this.
So I was supposed to have a physical exhibit at the Patterson Museum of this body of work. Due to COVID-19, the museum has been closed. So they created a virtual exhibit online. You can go to seekingrefugePhotos.com.
Right, and we also have pattersonmuseum.com /exhibits. Make sure everybody goes there, to check out Thomas's the whole entire body of work is there and needs to be seen and recognized.
So there are 7 essays in this project that focus on different aspects related to this theme of forced migration. And so one of the chapters is on the nonprofits at the U.S.-Mexico border, like Border Angels. In fact, I have a Border Angels thermos right here, and they provide a variety of services to migrants. And so there is this really cool thing that was going on not only at the U.S. border, but we saw this also in Greece, where these real grassroots organizations that are often run by young people, millennials, who are spending their time and using their passions to help others. That was really pretty remarkable, and I had not seen a lot of reporting on it. And so I dedicated one of the chapters to groups like Border Angels. Here they're hiking out into the desert to leave containers of water for migrants who cross illegally to get to the United States, because a lot of them, particularly in the summertime, die of dehydration and heat exposure. And so they were not aiding, they were not assisting, they were providing humanitarian aid. And they oftentimes come under the heat of Border Patrol for what they do.
Right. So the full name of the organization is Angels at the Border?
Well, the name of my reporting is Angels at the Border.
Right. And their organization, in case anybody wanted to find them?
Yeah, well, just one of the organizations I had done reporting on was Border Angels. They do phenomenal work in the Tijuana, San Diego area.
I just wanted to throw it out there again. And then, of course, there's the resettling parts of this project about Syrians building a new life here with unexpected friends. And this was an organization that you mentioned earlier, so why don't you give a minute?
Yeah, I love that picture. Stop right there for a second. So very early on in this project, I did reporting here in New Jersey. All news, all stories are local, right, Stefan? And so the Syrian refugees were being settled here in New Jersey. And the woman in the center who's standing on the chair was from Syria, and she didn't speak English, and her and her family were really struggling to get their footing here in the U.S. And Kate McCaffrey, who's on the right there, who's a professor at Montclair State, but does a lot of volunteer work, she connected her synagogue with a lot of the Muslim Syrian families, and this incredible bond happened as a result of it. This is one of my favorite stories. Yeah. And here, that's a great picture. So this family had just arrived in the United States, and they get hit with a bill for travel and airfare for their whole family, and they have no means of making income. And so Kate and her synagogue had raised money through a GoFundMe to help pay off their debt.
Wow. Yeah, no, I mean,
this is really important, Seth. So this is a cross-platform report I did for Tap Into Newark. In Newark, Newark is a sanctuary city, and one of their residents had been pulled over by police in a very simple traffic stop. And they forced him to give his name, and they ran it through the system, and they found that there was a immigration warrant in his name. He had not committed any crimes, but he missed a hearing, mainly due to the negligence of his lawyer. And he was turned over to ICE, and he was eventually deported. His case is still pending. But this happened in a sanctuary city, and it violated Newark's sanctuary city policy. And so my investigative piece, exposed how the city, this is not a widespread occurrence, but the city had the police had broken their sanctuary city policy. And one of the things that happened as a result of my reporting is that the Newark police, and to their credit, initiated a video training program for police on how to handle stops like this and how not to violate their sanctuary city policy. Nice result of my reporting.
Right. And then, of course, well, thank you for that and for detailing it all, because everybody needs to learn about this. I hope everybody goes to your site and the Patterson Museum site and learns deeply about the 6 to 7 bodies of work, photo essays that you've put together on this. It's a monumental feat. And being online now because of COVID, it's right at everybody's fingertips. So no excuses. You can get to this site and learn all about it. This is important for everybody to know about. And then, of course, there's the protests and also the activism surrounding this with local politicians, including Cory Booker, Senator Booker, and many others. But you've been documenting that as well. Very great photo here, by the way. Really, really powerful. And so tell us a bit more as we come to a close here on the last part here of the assimilation part and to the project, and however you want to close this out, Tom.
Yep. So one of those 7 essays is on assimilation and how, particularly where we are here in New Jersey, where we are such a diverse state and our communities are so richly diverse. That's a photograph of Paterson Mayor Andre Saya, who's a first-gen immigrant. Right. And to his right is Mayor Kerala, who's the 4-term mayor of Prospect Park, which is near Paterson. Mayor Kerala himself was a refugee from Syria and does tremendous work trying to help Syrian causes here in the States. And there are success stories all around us. I mean, this is nothing new. This is the American story, right? We are a country of predominantly immigrants, and these success stories exist all around us. But in South Paterson, the predominantly Middle Eastern, Turkish, Arabic community there, if you have not gone and you live in this area, you should go check it out. The food, the culture, the vibe of that neighborhood is tremendous. And so I did a lot of reporting there. Mayor Sayer is an old friend of mine and is doing tremendous work in the city of Paterson. And this is one of the chapters from the project.
Yeah, no, I love the way you capture his warmth and the connection to the community. And, it's just a beautiful thing. He seems like a really, really great man. And I tell you, being a born and bred New Yorker who became now 10, 11 years in New Jersey, I've been going to Paterson before COVID more and more, eating with my wife. And we've been exploring Paterson. And I have to tell you, I fell in love with Paterson. It is an amazing place. I love the diversity. I love the food, and I love the people. And we started.
So Stefan, I had also part of this project. I had done a piece that was published in the LA Times about the food and culture and how Mayor Saya is the Anthony Bourdain of Paterson. And so. Yeah. And so, I also, with all my reporting throughout my career, I've always tried to look for positive stories to tell as well, because, so much of the news is really negative. And there's people, like my wife, who don't like watching or listening or reading to stories that of that nature. So I try to stay balanced with my reporting. The Seeking Refuge project is not from a political perspective. It's told from a human perspective, and the humanity is really always what I've tried to tap into with my reporting.
Right. No, listen, it's like I said, it's a deep, deep body of work, and I can't wait to dig into it even more. I dug into it a lot for this show, but I want to learn even more because we've got the election coming up. We're not going to get into that and everything else, but we've got this is a turning point for America right now and for this country. And this is why I wanted to have you on and explore this body of work, because you can't ask for a more timely subject. We started with 9/11. We're here now with this. Tom, I have to tell you, it's been an incredible hour and 15 to 20 minutes. I was not going to cut it remotely short today. Your body of work, and you deserve better. And I'm just honored to have had you here. And I want everybody to once again know that Tom Franklin can be found on Instagram at Thomas E. Franklin. Thomas, I hope you don't mind if I've been calling you Tom the whole time.
The only one who calls me Thomas is my mother.
Okay, good. So Tom, I'm going to continue with that. But I can hardly wait till we can hang out more once this pandemic is hopefully nipped in the butt and we get a vaccine, and we're able to hang out more and get to be better friends, because
this is great, Stefan, and I want to thank everybody who tuned in. I see my cousin Holly tuned in. I love you, Holly, and so many friends and people. I really enjoy talking to people. Reach out to me on Facebook, social media. I'd be happy to.
Yeah, Tom's all over it, man. So, the thing is that I wanted to show some others up, but we're running out of time. We've shown a lot. I hope I've done you justice. Thank you very much. And stay around for 1 second. I'm just going to do a wrap up. And then I just wanted to say goodbye to you personally behind the scenes. Okay?
All right. Thanks, Stefan.
All right. Okay. Be right back. So I'm going to stop that from sharing. I'm going to remove you from the screen for 1 second and say, folks, I wanted to thank everybody. There's like 45 comments and other things where Tom and I, and we will get to it. We've tried to be as engaging as possible. My new goal with this show is to bring on live viewers. We did that as well. But I wanted to also get to a couple of final promos. Please don't exit yet so you can hear these. But one is from tomorrow's Sunday NYT read-along with Sri Srinivasan, my dear colleague who I work hand in hand with DigiMentors. And we do a lot of things. And tomorrow is Sri's Sunday NYT read-along. Join Sri and Liza Donnelly tomorrow, another one of my colleagues who's an incredible cartoonist, visual journalist, writer, and resident cartoonist at The New Yorker and CBS Sunday This Morning. Also, we have She's on Call, a great show tomorrow, Sundays at 11, with Dr. Sujana and Dr. Marina talking all things health, COVID, and many other things. Tune in tomorrow on all platforms at large. Hashtag She's on Call. And next week, I'm taking a detour here a bit, but I wanted to expand a bit with this and see how it goes. And I'm bringing on another resident of New Jersey here from Montclair, a great painter, Ricky, I call him, but let's do him justice here, Ricardo Jose Mujica. And Ricky is coming on next week, and he's going to talk about his work that has been shown all over the world, an accomplished painter beyond explanation in the short amount of time I have here, a lifelong friend of mine who I used to roller disco with back in the days. I'm not going to let that one get by, but Ricky is an amazing painter. Look at that work behind him. I can't wait to bring him on. So join us next week, and let's talk visuals in social media. So, folks, thank you so much for being here. And I wish everyone well. Stay safe, mask up, check out Tom's body of work, and be well. And thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to tune out here, and I'm going to say hello to everybody else behind the scenes. Take care, everybody. Stephen Kaplan, the Spin It Social Hour. Bye-bye.